Okay. So I just got done skating and I went 7 miles. I was going to do more, but then I tripped on a massive piece of salt and bit the dust. So since I wrecked myself, I decided to go ahead and call it rather than going a little further. Plus, it was moving a little slower today because it's a bit windy, and I think it was like roughly 11 and a half minutes per mile, which is no big deal. But I was thinking, it's like, okay, if I go to 11, which that's what, 4 more miles, it's like then potentially, I mean, I'm not really in the mood to dedicate that much more time to skating today. So I decided to just call it. So while I was skating, I had this like random thought about checking my email, the one that is hooked up to my YouTube thing, or like I have it where people can contact me, right? I put that in the description or whatever on the channel in case anybody wants to send me any messages, because I have had somebody reach out at this point in time. So, I put that on there a while back, and then I was thinking as I was skating, it's like I never checked that email, right? So since I never checked that email, but it's listed, I mean, I figured I should probably check it, right? So I just go in there, and I do, and I see this thing, and it says something about YouTube copyright something or other. I was like, pretty sure that's not actually the case, because I like when I tag anything, it's usually because like I've mentioned it, like, okay, this one was, I mentioned a song, and like that was it. Like it was I mentioned a song that was playing on the radio that I was excited to hear, and so I turned the volume up, and that was the day that I got hit by the school bus, right? So it was nothing about like actually the song, it was just the fact that the song was playing on the radio. But I couldn't remember in the video who it was by, but I wrote it in the little thing. I put mentions and the song, and then who it was by. So I'm pretty confident it was like a scam thing, because it was like it looked like I don't know. It didn't look legit. We'll say that. It had like the YouTube stuff on it, but it's like, okay. But then like the email, and there was like no actual information. It's like, I feel like this is not accurate. But I went ahead and looked online, was like, okay, so if such a thing were to come up, what would I expect, or what should I expect from somebody claiming that I've gone against copyright or whatever, 333. And it looked like it would be something that I could see on my channel. So I'll have to go back and look on my computer to make sure, because I can't see everything on my phone, but to see where it shows up on there. But it's like, I feel like that would have been an alert of some sort. I could be wrong, because I don't know a whole lot about this thing, but I know that if all I did was mention a song, that shouldn't count as copyright. So yeah, because like I didn't mention the lyrics of the song or anything. It was just the song specifically, and I couldn't remember who it was at the time, and so I went back and added it on in the description of the video, and I know that like the stuff that I put in the video, it's like that's kind of honestly like, okay, so when it comes to like tagging different channels or whatever, I will do that. if I mention anything, like, okay, a band, if I mention their song, right, I'll do that. Or, you know, channels that I was watching for whatever reason and something came to mind from their video. It's like, I'm not. I don't retain information well enough to flat out say the whole spiel of a video that I watch. But, you know, if there's something that came up that I mentioned from the video, then I'll tag the creator in just the fact that I, you know, mentioned them at all. And yes, there is that little piece where that, you know, will generally, I think, connect you to other people who follow said groups or channels or whatever, or, you know, it kind of helps to categorize what my stuff or who my stuff might be of interest to. But also the fact that it's a vlog and that I'm like, you know, at this point in time, for all intents and purposes, in this public forum space, a nobody, who's gonna care what I have to say on my vlog, right? Generally, I feel like the people that are more likely to come and stick around have probably found me because, like, I commented on, like, a narcissism page or a tarot reading, and something about whatever I said led somebody to my page, right? That's what I figure, or channel. That's what I figure is probably more likely to get traffic my way, right? Well, the bigger thing is, excuse me, while I know that there are a lot of people that probably get really annoyed when something like that pops up because you mentioned it, but it's not fully about that thing, I feel like later on, when I get to more of where I see this thing going, and likewise, this whole, I've said many times, writing is the thing, right? This is mainly my space for clearing some of the junk out of my system to understand where some of my misguided beliefs or you know, anything like that come up, right? So it's a space where I can clear that stuff out of my system. But I do believe that I am supposed to be in some kind of spotlight at some point in my life, which is a big part of the purpose of the channel too. Not because it's the thing that's going to get me there, but because once I get there, this is my healing process that has gotten me to the space where I can finally know what I believe enough to communicate it clearly in a writing space, right? So, like, every time I started writing, before I did anything with the YouTube stuff, I would go into, like, the heavy stuff with, like, you know, my suicidal ideation days or attempts, and I would get trapped in those feelings all over again, and then I couldn't move beyond it. So what I've discovered is, through this YouTube space, talking it out of my system allows me to make other connections to gain some clarity for the writing thing, right? So one of these days, the writing thing's going to happen, and that will be the thing that, or that will be one of the things people will know me for. But in the meantime, this is something that I've had to do to gain my footing, right? To realize where some of the ideas that I've even put in this space or spoken into this space have come from. Like I've said many times on here, I don't necessarily agree with everything I've ever said in this space. Sometimes the purpose is to get it out of my system, right? And then once it's out of my system, then to be able to see it and be like, okay, do I agree with that or no? And there's sometimes it's no. And sometimes it's something that I've inadvertently been playing out in my own life like I believed it, but then once I spoke it into the physical space, this is people finding my stuff on YouTube. That's not necessarily physical, but like the space of me saying the thing, and then when I rewatch it later to remember the things that I said, it's fucking therapy, right? It's my talk therapy. This has been where I've made those connections, where I've started to unravel some of the toxic ideologies that have been very firmly in my system and following me along 11 my entire life to prevent me from doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And then I talk a lot about how all the different ways that I've always been shrinking myself to make myself fit in these other spaces. Now, that said, the whole copyright thing, that's just like, that, no way. Because I don't include anybody's music. I'm not trying to sing anything. I simply mentioned that the name of the song and tagged the band that it was by. And that was mainly because I realized that I didn't remember who it was when I mentioned it. So like the idea that would be like a copyright thing, it's like, that feels sketchy. So like I said, I'll go verify on the YouTube stuff. I'll have to look around, but it's like I've not gotten anything except for this one email that looks like they took a screenshot of something, of like the YouTube header or whatever, and then put their own thing with it. So yeah. That's something that I'm getting better about too, like spotting the scammy type stuff, and sometimes saying the things like I've mentioned on here. There's been several times where my parents have been like on the verge of getting or having somebody they have somebody talking to them that's trying to scam them, right? And I'll walk into the room and they'll mention what's going on. It's like, that feels fishy. Right? I've thwarted a few different attempts of other people to, okay, there was one that my mom had this the blue screen thing that popped up, and like her computer, it wouldn't let her go any further, and she's all freaking out, and she turned it over to my father, pre-strokes, but she turned it over to my father, who's never really been good with technology. He does electrician stuff, but there's some technology that it's safer, like computers and phones and stuff. I don't want him touching my stuff because he likes to get carried away and adding something that he thinks going to help you, but then it, later find out it complicates something else. Anyway, nobody in the family has liked allowing him to have free reign of our technology because he's got a little bit of a reputation for not making the best decisions. So one day I walk in and he's trying to deal with somebody about this blue screen thing that came up, and there was a phone number. It claimed to be like something with Microsoft, and he had apparently already contacted the guy, had him on the phone, and there's a big whole thing going on, and he was basically letting them hook into my mom's computer. And I was like, ooh, all the red flags going off, right? Like all the red flags are up, the warning bells are going off. So I contacted two of my techie friends because I wasn't sure. I mean, it was like 10:30 in the evening. It's like I don't know what they're doing or if I'll necessarily get a response from either of them. I got responses from both of them, and both of them said, no, abort, right? Whatever you do not let that go any further. And so like I went in, and like one of the big things was the guy said, do not for any reason shut the computer off. It's like, well, that's the first thing we're doing then, shutting the damn computer off, and then we're taking it into Jeff and letting him fix it, right? So we can undo the shit that's just whatever shit we will later figure out has been done. I parked where the street lights like behind the rearview mirror. I was trying to just make sure the sun wasn't in my face, and I got that, but I didn't line up properly with the damn light. But anyway, here we are, and my bangs are doing funky things because I had them. I had a hat on when I was skating because my ears were cold. Well, because I didn't want my ears being cold, rather. But anyway, right. So like, there's been enough of these little things coming up with my family, and like just like other situations where it's like an attempt at scamming, and it's like that don't sit right. So that was kind of the thing with the email. It's like it looks like the YouTube header, which I mean that's easy to swipe. So but the Gmail and the email it said for support, it's like that doesn't feel like a supportive one. So yeah, like I said, I'll look at it. I feel like it should have come through the main page if it was a legitimate thing, and I feel like just everything with it is fishy. Anyway, we're not buying it. We're gonna go check and just make sure I don't have any stupid strikes that I would need to. I would protest that though, because it's like that literally just mentioned the song. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that was the thing while I was skating. It's like I should check my email, and then I did, and then I got that. And it's like, what the fuck is this all about? So started a whole different I don't know. I was on a different path, I guess, at that point in time, trying to figure out what I was doing as far as the video goes. I'm gonna move so this lighting isn't annoying me the whole time. So anyway, I don't know that I'll love this spot, but yeah. If I sit up here, it's fine. But yeah, anyway. So what was I thinking? Okay, so it's one of my, I watched, see, here's another one. I'm going to mention that I watched Conjuring 4, and I was less disappointed than I thought I'd be, because, you know, generally when there are the religious themes anywhere involved, then it's like, but I watched that one, and it's like, all right, we're not going to make that an irredeemable factor that it has some sort of religious themes based on the fact that the people in it were, the two main characters that it was about were Catholic. So, we're gonna excuse that, right? And just watch the movie for the sake of the movie, and it was fine. But yeah, okay, so I watched The Drop, right? Or Just Drop. And it's one that I mentioned, I saw it at the library, and it was in the new section. It got my attention. It's what even made me realize that, The Conjuring was there too, because I was already there looking at things. But this movie, Drop, right? I really liked it. I mentioned the other day when I got it, it's like it said something about Blumhouse on the top of it. It's like, all right, I like their stuff. I've watched some movies through them recently and really enjoyed them. So, and I can't. Anyway, I'm not going to try to come up with the names of the movies that I saw through or that were done through them. But this one I really liked. And there was like this, okay, so there's like chaos in the movie, right? That's basically the point. You got the character, and she's got this chaotic thing that's going on. Meanwhile, she's also on, and this is another point, she's on the first date after getting out of an abusive relationship. So, of course, she's got a kid. She's, like all the struggles that come with putting yourself out there after getting out of a toxic relationship anyway, right? But then she's got this other thing that's going on that's like the bigger point of the movie, but it's making for a very chaotic date. And, at one point, her date's getting ready to give up on her and leave, and she, she kisses him, and, of course, he talks him into staying. But, they sit down at the table, and, she's talking about what made you contact me, what made you want to go out, and all this stuff. And he was talking about, being on the dating app, and there's like all these people and hiding behind their pretenses or whatever. And then he came across her profile, and there was something about it that gave him hope, right? So then I was thinking about like this whole idea of just hope, right? Because that's kind of like a huge thing, right? So, of course, the movie, the way it was presented, I was like, I get that, right? That feeling, in spite of all the chaos that's going on, having hope that the person that you're connecting with isn't like, just completely out there or whatever. But it made me think through like this whole freaking journey that I've even been on, right? So it's like one of the biggest struggles that I had growing up was actually that it's like there was that little element where I wanted to be hopeful about some things. Like I wanted to be hopeful about like this big amazing love story and like all these things, right? But then there was so much that was coming at me that was like ultimately trying to dash the hope, right? It's like very much not wanting you to have hope that there was anything worthwhile out there. And if you can, stay in the forever state of apathy and just let things happen and feel like you're not in control of them because you have no hope, I mean, then that takes you to some pretty dark places, right? So, I ended up waking up the next morning after I watched it and was writing for a while, and that was the biggest thing that I came up with. It's like that's the whole point of like this twin flame journey that I talk about a lot, right? So it's that piece where in spite of what I've been learning through this space and talking my way through things and realizing about toxic connections that I've had in my life, and how my toxic family situation ultimately was the thing that led me well, it led to me ending up in the toxic relationship, right? So, I've mentioned that the idea of, my conditioning teaching me that I was not my own, right? I was somebody's property till I was somebody else's property, right? I belonged to my father until I got married off, and then I belonged to my husband. That whole idea. And so feeling like I didn't have a choice in that matter, right? So I had to, the choice that I made in that situation was to see if my dad or my brother would say anything, right? Because men. So if your father's not there to say anything, then your brother can fill in because because he's a male, and, you know, still the whole property thing. But ultimately, the thing that I was, when I ended up with my ex, it was, do they care enough about me to say something when everything else is showing that this is not a good situation, right? So it's like, for where I was coming from, it's like I picked the worst possible option because I needed either my dad or my brother to tell me that I didn't have to go through with this thing. But when that didn't happen, it basically amounted to feeling like I was, you know, I got fed to the wolves, right? Like, my dad and my brother both said they didn't like him from the get-go, but neither one of them said anything about it, right? So for me to be raised with this sort of idea of needing somebody else to free me from, this, you know, this whole ultimately bad belief system, this stupid idea that, you know, I'm somebody's property until I'm somebody else's property, you know, that whole bullshit thing. Since they didn't do that, but then they actually owned up to it, they hated him the whole time, they just didn't feel like we had, okay, like my brother said, he had gone away, he was in the Air Force, he came back for the wedding, but he was living across the country. And I don't know if it was Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, or where it was at that point in time, but he was across the country. So when he came back, his thing was, he felt like he'd been gone long enough, he didn't have the right to say anything to me. You know, and then the thing he said was, basically, Dad was probably afraid to say anything because he didn't know how I reacted, or how I would react, right? So there again, pinning it to, I'm the perpetual problem. So, you know, get rid of me, marry me off to some asshole that I've no business being in a relationship with, but because of how badly I felt about myself, and also needing one of the men in my life to speak up at a time I didn't feel like I could, because like my mom said something, and my best friend at the time, who was my maid of honor, she said something. I mean, they both said, you don't have to go through with this, but I couldn't have it come from them. I needed it to come from either my dad or my brother, and it didn't, you know. But like my mom, the thing with her was, I always felt like she was trying to live vicariously through me, so of course she's not gonna like him. You know, she's not, you know, but then too, ultimately she's not going to like anybody that my brother or I would come up with, because we weren't supposed to go have our own lives. We were supposed to be available for the family forever, and that was the be all end all, you know. And I've mentioned on here before, when I was going through my divorce, that very last time that they moved me back, at some level, it felt like there was this little pat on the back for her, because it went exactly how it was supposed to go, to get me back home to take care of the family when they're in their older years, right? And they can't do it for themselves. But the issue I have on that end is they don't want to do for themselves, right? So it'd be another story if it didn't amount to, they spent their years catering to their parents because that was what they were trained to do, but not because anybody ever did anything worthwhile. It was just ultimately living in the chaos that makes you think chaos is normal, right? So one of the things with, you know, my situation with my ex was the chaos felt comfortable. The chaos was what I was used to. The chaos felt like home because I didn't know anything other than the chaos, right? So then, like, I've had this thought too. Like, there was a span of time when I first moved back from Alabama. I couldn't not listen to music in the car. I had to have something going all the time. And eventually one day it's like, I need peace, right? And there was one day I did finally turn the radio off, but it was a struggle because then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and it's like, this is uncomfortable and I don't like thinking. It's like, this is uncomfortable to not have something else to distract me in this moment. But ultimately, what I've since realized is that was very much a part of the having chaos surrounding me my entire life. It felt normal, so it was more comfortable than peace, right? So then I end up in this toxic relationship because I need somebody. I knew from the get-go that was not the one. That was not where I was supposed to be. That was not a good connection, right? And I knew that everybody around me didn't like him, but I needed my dad or my brother to release me from that obligation, and they didn't. So I felt like I had to go through with it. But I mean, ultimately, it went exactly like it was going to go because, I've mentioned on here several times too, my entire life, I knew I was going to be the one in the family that was going to have to get divorced because my grandfather would always, he was the one that was always bragging about how his family didn't get divorced, right? But then, like, all the ways that he also confirmed to me over and over again that I wasn't really part of his family, even though his daughter is my mother, and that's all biological. It's just I'm the one that does the different things, right? I'm the one that has the colorful hair. I'm the one that has all the facial piercings. That, I was the first that got tattoos, and so it's like every single time I was around him, he was always pointing out something about me that was different because ultimately he was trying to let me know that I was a problem. I didn't fit, right? And for his illusion of this big happy family, and I don't fit, I'm the one that's going to fuck up the illusion, right? So, yeah. But anyway, going back to that hope piece, it's like finally getting to the point in that connection with my ex where, and it was a struggle too, because there was that piece where, like my grandfather always saying the thing, my dad always listening to the church bullshit where they're talking about how, how it's this big horrible thing that there are so many marriages in the church that end by divorce, and how this is, this is completely inappropriate. But the system completely sets you up to end up in toxic situations that you can't get out of, right? And then basically through the elimination of hope, it keeps you, the system itself is abusive, right? So because, okay, first off, let's go back to this point that I don't think I'm clear enough. I'm confident that in my aggravation with religion, I'm not clear on this point very often. But the early church that actually tried to heed to Jesus' teachings is not the same that we have now. Because, that that group of people, the early Christ followers, they weren't out to appeal to the government ways of being. It was basically, if you learn to be autonomous and separate from the system, then the system loses control, and the system doesn't like that. So then you have like the I think Constantine was one of them that, come in and, I don't like this situation because people are too unruly and they're not they're not easily controlled. And obviously that's not good for the government. So, they went in and hijacked the thing, and it's not just that one. He was a big one. And I mentioned him because my dad was watching something the other day that was talking about him. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that name. And I think it was also talking about, or it mentioned that, they took the festivals that were already in place for like around the Christmas season, and because it already had a big enough following, they inserted this other thing over the top of it to make it easier for people to shift to what they wanted them to believe, because they didn't necessarily just say you have to do this way or we will kill you. But generally there's some of both of that in there. But right, so the government goes in and assaults the beliefs and makes it about something else, and then of course you have like generations down the line, you have this hot mess that we have in America, right? So all of that, it was basically set up through all these other systems where the ruler of the time wasn't happy because the spiritual community wasn't controllable enough. So we're gonna tweak, we're gonna kill some people, and we're gonna put this other way of seeing things. And and of course, if you're in a situation and you are watching everybody be slaughtered off around you, you're more likely to go along with the thing to prevent yourself from meeting your demise, right? So generations and generations of that lead to this atrocious situation we have now, and with like the whole bullshit of like Christian nationalism, which is definitely not what Jesus was trying to teach. And they're up there now. It's like politics and religion are like the biggest fuck buddies there are, right? They're all fucking us, who don't agree with either of them. But that's been the thing with like the narcissism. It's because it's as much of an issue as it is collectively, because that's what religion has changed it to be. It's like Christianity is just the modern day Pharisees, right? So and I remember when I was sitting through church lessons and whatnot, and all this talk about the Pharisees, and then Jesus came, and then the Pharisees were pissed, obviously. But he showed that there was another way. But then, because people believed it, the rulers started shifting it so they could take it back over, right? So now it's modern day Pharisees. Anyway, I had another thought of where I was going with that, but then I just lost it. So I'm not going there. And see, honestly, this is the stuff that I figure when there's any kind of issues with the YouTube stuff and my space, it will be more because of these kind of messages than anything. But also taking into consideration the fact that where I started out in this space, like my old videos, when I had my first 3 followers, I cried, right? So where I was then, it was much more of a dense space, right? So I didn't have hope. Or actually back then when I started it was a spark of hope, and it was wanting it to be something more and trying to you know, because it was the whole twin flame thing. So like I encountered my counterpart online, and then it's that soul recognition where all at once I'm so very aware of how unsafe I feel in my body, right? So then this becomes the thing that I have to do, and I started it because, you know, he had to be in a spotlight so I could find him, but how was he ever going to find me if I didn't start doing more than I'd ever done? So I start doing the thing, right? And then as I do the thing, as I'm clearing out this density from my system, you know, and when I started, I was skating all the time. So that was another thing that I was doing that was helping in that direction, you know, but like the more I sorted through and the more I've released from my system, this is my version of healing, right? This is the space that I've had that's been a safe space to do that, right? So what I figure is now that I'm getting mouthier about my beliefs and whatnot, I don't feel like most people are able to receive where I'm at now. Like my family, I mean, I can say some stuff around them about the religious things, and it will piss them off, but they don't know how to respond to it because they can't affect my energy like they used to, right? Because when I was in the space of being burdened by all the bad beliefs that had been dumped on me along the way, then my finger's getting hot over here. You know what? I'm just gonna shut the fucking car off. It's 40 minutes. It's okay, right? But anyway, now it just seems really quiet. Anyway, I feel like now that I'm gaining more clarity about like my own beliefs and this light is driving me nuts. So hold on. All right, it's dimmer, but it's at least not cutting my forehead off. But yeah, like as I gain some clarity around what I do believe and why I feel the way I do about, like, you know, religion and whatnot, I feel like there's less people that, you know, it's one of those things where as you release the density, you irritate all sorts of people's demons because, you know, those that are choosing to remain locked in their own issues and not heal from it. I mean, they're always willing to take offense. But, you know, and like yesterday, I mentioned I wanted to talk about the hope piece more. Yesterday, I did mention it a couple times. Like that was something that stood out to me when I was doing the video, or when I was watching it later, was it's like I did mention it, but I didn't go with the full theme, right? But like like the space that I was in back then, you know, in my college days, trying to cram myself in the little box of religion. You know, shrinking myself, right? That's the thing that religion requires you to do, is shrink to be acceptable, right? And the reason narcissism is a problem is because religion, as we have it today, is set up specifically to allow people, you know, who are acceptable to the religion to bully the crap out of everybody else. And then as soon as somebody starts standing up to them, shift into the victim mentality and, oh, you just don't like me because of Jesus. It's like, I have no problems with Jesus, but you're an asshole, right? So, and like most of the people that, you know, would are in that class, that's what the, you know, the emperors along the way with the failing empires were doing, was trying to make the people controllable again. And in doing so, it created this system where this whole, like the whole narcissistic abuse thing is like rampant. And people see, that's the funny thing is, like, okay, like all the years that I've been bullied by different people in my life. It's like, if you start firing back the same stuff to them that they're doing to you, they crumble. They cannot handle it, right? And like, all you gotta do is look at the dipshit in chief to see that in action, right? Like, he's so used to being the bully and getting whatever he wants, and then when people start making fun of him, it's like, he starts, well, I mean, it's stupid. He's getting worse because ultimately he's losing control, right? But anyway, I don't want to talk about that. So going back to the hope piece, right? So like, the movie mentioned the thing, and then I woke up and wrote about it for a while. Like, that's been the biggest thing. It's like, this whole healing thing has been only based on a little hope, right? So I got out of the toxic relationship and then end up encountering this person that, I mean, is the soul recognition thing. It's like somehow we felt familiar to one another, and next thing I know, I feel completely unsafe in my body, and I don't know what's going on, right? And it basically kickstarted this whole, now it's time to heal, now it's time to clear the stuff out of the system so we can have better, right? So there's been a lot of times in my life where I've wanted to have the hope for the happy ending, right? I mean, whatever that looks like. And I feel like marriage and family will be included in that, but not the family that I've been, that I'm coming out of, right? Because I realized how that the whole purpose of this family system was to keep me small and to make it so I couldn't go anywhere, and I felt obligated to take care of the family, right? So I didn't ever take the risk at having my own life, right? I was too afraid to do anything, because I was confined to the cage, right? But so this healing thing starts, and I've said many times, I didn't know who the guy was to me. I didn't know what happened. It was like, I made a crack to a friend about maybe I should manifest one of those, and then she said something that was kind of like, basically cutting down the idea of, musicians, don't take them seriously, kind of a thing. But what I said in that space was where she was like, yeah, that's not a good idea, and that was a short-lived friendship anyway. But my response to what she said was, yeah, you're probably right. Andy's a Leo, and the last Leo I was involved with, that didn't go very well, right? So it's like, I allow this other thing to talk me out of it, right? So, like, there was some stuff that came up in that time frame. Like, I stumbled across the Twin Flames 1111 page, and got like this little class information thing that she had, and I was reading up on Twin Flame stuff. It's like, it felt relevant, but I still felt very disconnected from it, right? So kind of pushed it back. It's like, yeah. It's like, on the one hand, I love the idea that there's somebody else out there that's like, that will get me. That seemed like a great idea, because, one of the biggest things in my life is like the fact that I've spent my entire life feeling so completely misunderstood in every space. So, the idea that there's an exact match, and somewhere in there I've had the belief over the years, and, I've talked about the song when I was 4, and, how I see it now as like a check-in before he incarnated. But at the time, it's like, I don't know what this is, but I like the idea of it. But still, like, there was so much along the way. Like, even, the one big piece with the check-in before he incarnated, right? Like, the biggest piece was, where it will be very hard. There will be a lot of pain. but it will be worth it in the end. And, little me was just like, yeah, love. Okay, forget the rest. Who cares about anything else? You said it's going to be like this big, amazing love story. Let's do that one. Right? And then, like spending my entire life in these situations where, like, okay, being with my family and the times where I could flat out see what they were doing, saying that's not love. That's not love. That's not love. And, realizing, I mean, of course, now I realize that it's like if you grow up in that space of having been conditioned to look for love outside of yourself, then you don't have the capacity to give love to others either, right? So it's like I could see what like my mom was doing, and I could like everything with that, just see that's not love, and like the time she stopped me in the hallway when I was on my way to my room. Her room is across the hall, since I had to move back. But I was going back to my room, and I was like in high school, and she calls me in the room to say, and like I was minding my own business, y'all, to say the thing, right, where she says, you're a very pretty girl, but you don't act like it. Or another occasion of, I'm your mother, so I have to love you, but I don't like you very much. It's like, yeah, that's not love. So like all those little things, right, and just how it was like chipping away at me. But then in reality, it's like, because she also had the same kind of upbringing where she was trying to earn love, right? And she'll claim that, that her daddy was so wonderful now, which is really weird because, years ago she used to see things that they did as, an issue, but now it's like they never did anything wrong. It's like, okay, you can keep that trash thinking if you want, but she definitely knows how I feel about, I did tell her flat out that as far as I'm concerned, he outlived his usefulness by 33 years. So, because it was always about his death, right? The whole point of his life, it's like he somehow had done something spectacular by keeping everybody terrified to do anything but wanting to keep him alive longer, right? So he was just sucking the life out of everybody. But anyway, so going back to moving back, right? Like one of the pieces that, because, okay, there was this moment, there were a couple moments actually, when I was still in Alabama with my ex. The one, he was chasing Taz around trying to kick him. And I got in his face and told him that if he kicked my dog, we were going to have some serious problems. And he got like this sadistic thing. It's like basically mocking me. So he was like, that's what I needed you to do all along. And, I finally stood up to him. And so he, he's ready to tear me down, kind of a thing. Right. But in the moment, it was me standing up for my dog. But I had this awareness that if it came down to something happening to me, and like I knew we were at that point where I had fulfilled my purpose as far as what he needed me to do, and he was done with me at that point, right? So like basically I was garbage to him. So I stand up for my dog, and then he's also had these comments that he's been making about how he could see himself accidentally killing somebody someday in his anger, and realizing that he'd have no problem killing me, right? That was where we were. And it's like he was just looking for an opportunity to, like in this situation, since I stood up for to him where my dog was concerned, um, it was, that could be the thing, right? Where, of course, he could make that, he could easily turn that into something else, and that I got after him and I was the one that was abusing him or whatever, right? So, luckily, the connection wasn't physically abusive, it was all emotional and psychological. But there, I mean, there's a whole lot of complexities in that whole situation in and of itself, right? So, the other time was when I was reclining on the bed. I wasn't laying all the way down, and he came in, and I was, he was like fucking with me immediately. And the bigger thing at that point in time was, he said I just needed to get laid and then I wouldn't go anywhere. And he tried to force himself on me, and I shoved him. And when I shoved him, he stumbled back and, fell into the wall. And all three dogs jumped in like immediately. It was like I shoved, and like then they were up and over me, right? So Gidget laid across my chest, Taz stood over my waist, and Ziva stood over my feet. And they were all like, Taz and Ziva were snarling at him and snapping. And I see him start swatting at Ziva. Ziva's the one we had from 2013, right? So she's been with us the longest, and he was going straight for her because, the whole time she hated him. Especially after I got my TBI and, everything was fucked up anyway. It's like, I don't know up from down half the times, and, she was there to try to protect me when I didn't realize that I needed protecting. And so to see him like start swatting at her, trying to antagonize her to bite him, it was that awareness that, we're at that point. The voice that came in was, they're doing their job of protecting you. It is your job to protect them. It is time to leave, right? So it was these situations where, together I was seeing that it didn't matter if something happened to me and the dogs were left with him, or if he did something to the dogs to get to me. It's like, one way or another, he hated my relationship to the dog and the fact that I liked the dogs better than him, and they liked me better than him as well. So it's like, either way, that's where we're at. It's like, he's either going to do something to me or do something to them to get to me. And the only way that I could do anything about that, obviously, was leave. Right? So then I get out of the situation, and there was a lot to getting out of the situation in and of itself, but like, there was so much of it when I came back here and just kind of wanted to turn in on myself and like self-destruct. And like, a lot of the energetic hiding that I've been wanting to do has been since I came back from that, right? But then this thing happens where I encounter this other energy, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? Now I'm just so very aware of not feeling safe in my own body, and then I'm having to process through this other stuff. And, like, roller derby became this thing where it was on my bucket list for before I turned 30, but then I didn't end up doing it then. So I put it on the bucket list for 40. Then, I was pushing 40, so it was like, all right, let's figure this out, right? And so I decided to do it. And that ended up being a safe space to try out new ways of being, because, my family, the very, very conservative, and then I end up in this space, so it's very liberal, right? So it gave me a space to safely try on new ways of being and new things, figuring out different things that I like, or making different connections. Like one of the connections I made was, okay, so I had a whole lot of teammates that were in same-sex marriages, right? And it's like every single one, I guarantee, is an actual loving connection, despite everything that I've heard with like the conservative upbringing shit, and my experiences in those spaces with conservative people and whatnot. It's like, this is a whole new experience. It's like, this is like people actually love each other, right? And they actually, I think the biggest thing is, especially belonging to that, if you belong into the LGBTQIA population or whatever, is you already had to face a whole bunch of your own darkness before you were able to have the relationship, right? It's like you grew up with people trying to villainize you, right? That kind of stuff. So it's like, it makes sense that the relationships that are forged because of, what anybody's had to go through already, you've already dealt with your own shadow more than anybody has if they're trying to bully you into submission, right? That's the big thing. The bullies don't deal well with having to face somebody that stands up to them or whatever, or stands very much in contrast to what they're trying to force them to believe about themselves. Like, the bullies want to keep you small, because if they can keep you small, then they don't have to deal with the fact that they already feel small themselves. But for those of us that have been bullied most of our lives, we've already dealt with that shit. We're not afraid of pissing people off because we're bright and colorful and have the weird piercings and things like that anymore, because that's been the big thing, is like my eyebrow ring. I've talked about that several times. That was the first facial piercing that I got. I mean, I have 2 holes in my nose, but I got like the 4 things, right? So it's not like I have a ton. There are people that have way more, but at the same time, for this one, I needed somebody else outside of me to give me permission to do the thing. It was like I was talking to somebody on a dating app, and I randomly commented that I thought about getting my eyebrow pierced. He was like, "You should do it." It's like, okay, confirmation, I can do this and this is okay, because I wasn't going to get that from my family. So, so I take it to this, I just present it as this thing, and then somebody says yes. So then when I came to the nose ring and the lip ring, I was like, I don't need somebody else to tell me I can do that. I thought of, like, okay, in, I think it was like 2010, I was working with this one girl at a group home. We were both staff. She was like my best friend in that time frame. And I remember we were having this conversation, and I said, if you could get anything pierced without it being an issue for a work situation, what would you get pierced? And I don't remember what she said, but I randomly said my lip ring, or I would get my lip pierced, and I had never thought of it. But all at once, here I am saying it. It's like, So then, 2023, it's like, well, I thought about this once, so maybe I should do it. It's like, I don't know why I thought about it, but I did. So then I was working with somebody at Honda that had the double hoop, and it's like, I really like that. So then it's like, well, since I'm already going after my lip ring, I'll go ahead and do that too, because I thought about it, so why not? So then it was like, when I did it, it's like, all right, then I set the intention that I give my love. Okay, I set the intention that I would never again work in a job that asked me to be less than 100% who I am. So first thing that happens is that job went, because it didn't have a problem with me having the colorful hair, the piercings, or anything like that. but it was a space that I had to wear a uniform. So it's like, still in that way, you know, there's something about me that I'm having to tone down while I'm in that space. So it's like, okay, that's got to go, right? So it's like just all these different events. But like the biggest thing has been like this whole healing process. Like I started the YouTube channel because, okay, let's go back to that twin flame piece that I don't think I addressed, or I don't think I finished addressing the thing. I started the channel after turning my 11 career lives over to the universe to take the lead on. Then I had a song that popped up that I got really into, and I just played it over and over again until, you know, that voice chimed in and said, "That's him. That's the one you've been looking for all your life." And I was like, yeah, right. He's out of my league, right? And that voice came back with, "Are you going to let us handle this, or do you want to do it your way again? Because it's worked so well for you." And it was just like, I don't believe it, but what else do I have to go on, right? It's like, I just turned the thing over to the universe to take the lead on, and then I'm given a hint, and I reject it. It's like, it's like, okay, so what's the worst that can happen by me believing, or by me allowing this to be a thing that's moving me, right? So it's like, all right, so I absolutely believe he was out of my league at that point in time. I don't think that stands now. But I think that too has been like a back and forth on trying to elevate, you know, as you ascend that whole process, it's clearing the dense, icky stuff away. But, you know, okay, so I said the thing, and then this intuitive voice chimes in with, "That's the one you've been looking for." What do I have to lose if I allow myself to hope that there is this best case scenario possibility out there, and it might be this person, right? So then leaning into that, it's like, all right, so the first thing that came up was, now, okay, they're not see, when you try to lock it into a first, second, third order kind of a thing, it's like, yeah, well, did that happen first? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff that happened, and ultimately it comes down to time is an illusion anyway, right? So anyway, you know, one of the things that happened, okay, there was the day at the zoo where it felt like he was with me, and it's like, I don't know what that's about, but I can't explain this experience, but it feels like he's here with me, right? But then this other thing comes up. It's like, okay, so he had to be in a spotlight so I could find him, but how's he ever going to find me, right? So start the thing, right? Start talking through the things and it being this healing thing. Like that's the whole point, right? That's what the channel became, was me talking through shit to get it out of my system and, you know, learn more or gain clarity about who I am, what I believe, and where I'm coming from on anything, right? Gain insight, gain clarity, have some sort of footing. You know, it's like, I've said a lot on here, this is my foundation building space. So I'm talking about things that I've always had like some ideas about, but I've never truly allowed myself to lean into that belief. So now I'm doing this thing and I'm taking the space to lean into the belief and that hope. You know, it's like, as I see how I've changed, and then something comes up and I see something that he posts somewhere along the line, and it sounds like he's changing as well, right? Because like, there's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because a few months ago he had this thing that he posted, like a story on Instagram, And it was something about, I think somebody complimented him, and he said something about, thank you, I needed the validation. And I just had like this wave wash over me of this this really intense feeling of validate your own damn self, right? And you know, I think it was in that time frame where I wasn't spending much time on Instagram. And then like the next time I got on it, it's like he wasn't on it as much either. And it's like he started, I don't know, just like something seemed to shift in what he was putting out there, the energy he was putting out there. And so it's like this whole back and forth thing, but it's like it all comes down to what's the worst that could happen if you lean into the hope, right? So I feel like this, again, this version of me does not exist without him existing, because everything that's happened in the time that I've connected with his energy is forcing me to have to deal with my own shit, right? It's forcing me to have to process through things in this space more and more to clear it out. So it's not something that I'm just carrying with me all the time, right? And as I'm doing this, I also have this writing thing, and I'm on book 18 of the Twin Flame Journals. And it's, you know, basically where I'm writing through the connections that I'm making in this space, or even before I get to this space. You know, they go hand in hand on 11/11. As far as I have to talk so much out of my system, then I have to write some out of my system, right? And then I'm making new connections. And then I can't sleep because I'm making new connections. But it all comes back to like this hope piece ultimately, right? So it's like, what's the worst that could happen if we lean into the hope, right? And yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking because this is getting kind of long again. Keep mentioning doing the shorter videos, and every now and then I'll do the 35, 40-minute ones, but then I come back to the longer ones. Eventually. I mean, I don't know that I'll ever do like the shorts or anything, at least probably not by myself. But I feel like I'm getting to where I can open up about stuff more me earlier on in the videos. So like when I first started out, is I talk a whole lot, and then as I got to a certain point, it's like then I felt okay with letting more of me actually be seen, right? So like some of the stuff that I was saying and doing, it's like it feels like it's safe for me to be open about this now, or it's safe for me to allow this part of me to exist. But you know, that didn't used to be the case, right? But when I was starting out, and it was like, you know, I get like an hour and a half in, and then I'm starting to allow me to be seen. It was because I've talked through enough of the boring stuff that, I mean, most people probably aren't going to stick around unless there's just something about me that they feel so connected to in the moment or whatever. So then like toward the end of it's more safe, right? Anyway, I want to stop talking. As always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.